Say something?
Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah, I was saying like if somebody could watch the stream and make sure that like you hear what I'm saying. Hello, hello. You hear me? Yeah, I'm good to go.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, okay. Yo, never mind. We're all good. We can hear it. Hello, hello, hello. Check 1 2. Hello, hello. Oh.
Mike goes in here,
Where should we leave it for you?
inside this bag.
Oh no, I mean
give
like.
it, give it to Azar.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
Actually, give it to anyone that's gonna go to the core team meeting on Monday, and then I'll get it there.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
And then the camera goes in here. The camera cable goes in inside this box.
All right.
This is used for tying up the mic.
Okay. 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 Gotcha.
Everything else, the USB hub is also
Both of them.
the
Yeah.
USB. This USB hub is also mine. And that's it. Everything else.
Don't forget your wallet.
Yo, you're live, so don't take long.
Yeah, I know. I'm just waiting for you guys to like to sit down or whatever.
What do you mean you're gonna fill it? You're leaving too?
Oh, guys, we're about to start the event, so it'll be.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, let me know with the mic. I might actually need it for some. Okay.
I got different equations though. Different equations to pass that course.
How's it going? Good luck, Danny.
Thank you.
I know where the building was, so yeah.
Whoa. I guess it's pouring out there, huh?
This was a meeting room? Usually it's a computer science building. Oh, okay. I've been doing the classes like right across the street. Right. The other case? Yeah.
I think my problem is that I think it's still getting C's and they start getting A's. You know you're gonna go to grad school. You won't go to grad school just to say fuck all you guys.
All right. Hopefully you guys are don't need to check it anymore because I'm about to move the slide. So, how's everybody doing?
Pretty good.
All right. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and start the event. Okay. So yeah. First of all, thanks everybody for coming. And yeah, today we're gonna be talking about the specific areas in software development that you can get into. So first thing I wanted to say is 85% of computer science graduates within the last 5 years graduated with not really knowing what they wanted to do, not having a job, and barely knowing how to code. Notice I said graduated, which means the issue isn't graduating, it's just not having a job set up. But yeah, I said 85%. I was just kidding, by the way. That was a completely made up statistic. So although the actual statistics are much lower than that, it's something that does happen to a good amount of computer science graduates and just students in general. Sometimes don't have a plan set up for after graduation. Now, you guys here, I assume most of you are computer science majors, right?
Yep.
By a show of hands, how many are computer science majors? Okay, so that's like almost everybody, except for some people that aren't in college yet. And yeah, so if you're a CS major, you already got one of the difficult parts figured out of being a student, which is deciding what your major is even going to be, right? And CS is arguably one of the best majors. For one, because it's a STEM field. So compared to other fields, your path to success is a little bit more, it's less abstract than if you were like a, I don't know, psychology major, philosophy, art major, something like that. A lot of people graduate with degrees like this, maybe in like an art major, and they're thinking, oh, well, I like art, but I'm not sure how I'm gonna make money doing this to support my future. What's up?
Stay more in front of the camera. Apparently, you're moving out of frame.
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't want to like stay in this spot the whole time, but oh well. But yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, so as a computer science major, you don't really have that issue where you need to wonder, oh, am I going to be able to do something to have financial stability? The funny thing is about being in a major like this is that one of the biggest issues you have is that there's so much opportunity. It's almost like there's too much. All the opportunity comes because in software development or in tech in general, there's so many different fields you can go into that it's hard to know which one you want to go into or where you even want to get started. So today what we're going to talk about is software development specifically in the tech industry, because finding your path in tech is about a lot of different things, but what we're focusing on now is software development, which is one of the main ways of figuring out how to navigate your tech career is by knowing what opportunities are out there. So a lot of you may have been told before, oh, well, if you want to stand out and if you want to learn more outside of class, just do a project. Do something you're passionate about. But somebody says do a project, well, how do you even know where to begin, right? Because I'm sure most of you have been in a situation before where you just feel overwhelmed because you know that there's so many technologies out there. You hear people talk about 80 different terms for technologies that you've never even heard of. But what you need to do is just figure out one thing you want to get into first, and then get good at that, and you'll be set. Don't make the mistake that a lot of people make, which I know I've made, maybe some of you have made before, which is thinking too much about what you should learn to the point that you're wasting too much time thinking and you're not actually learning something. Just start off by learning something. Learn any kind of development, and then you'll be good. And then after that, well, you don't have to know exactly what field you want to go into in software engineering, but it's good to start trying different things, because that's the only way you'll know where you want to go into. Web development, mobile development. So today, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about web development, first of all, or first we're going to talk about AI, actually. AI and machine learning. Also web dev, and then mobile dev, and then UI, UX. So when it comes to each of these areas, even if you've narrowed it down to like web dev, for example, there's still more to think about. Like, do I want to go into front end, back end? What do I want to do with web dev? So our job today is going to be to sort of get rid of some of that ambiguity for you guys, so you're going to have a better idea of how to get started narrowing down what you're going to do, not even once you graduate, but before you graduate. So if you apply to internships, it'll definitely look a lot better if you have at least some kind of idea of what you want to do. Like, not just, oh, a computer science student, software developer. If you're a little earlier in your college career, that's fine. But once you start getting later, like into being a junior or senior, then you're gonna be they're gonna expect you to have a little bit more figured out of what exactly you want to do. So we're going to talk about each of these fields briefly, not going into like too much depth, but giving you enough information so that you can get started and have some examples of projects that might be good to begin with. So the first thing we're going to discuss today is a field that is it's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's something that is actually going to keep becoming more useful very quickly, and that's artificial intelligence and machine learning. So I'd like to invite one of our newest core team members, actually, a very special guest we have, who actually just drove here all the way from Orlando just to come here. Well, actually, I don't know if you came just to come here, but oh, he came from Orlando. But yeah, I'd like to welcome Pranjali. Thank you. There you go.
Hi everyone. Pranjali. Sorry, I myself forget the pronunciation of my name, but yeah, it's Pranjali.
I didn't know.
And oh, okay. 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 So I actually did indeed drive. I mean, not drive. I was on a bus ride all the way from Orlando to Miami for the event. But yeah, I'll just get started with AI and ML and how you can potentially get into introductory projects and build your skills in the field. So, what types of problems / goals are present in AI? Very beginning, what even is AI, and how did people start to, how did the craze behind AI build? Because it's not like any other core technology like web development or competitive programming or any other core skill like that. And so how did AI and ML itself get so popular? The answer to that would be Coursera. And if you guys have ever looked up machine learning on the internet, the very core teacher of that online is Andrew Ng, and he's actually the co-founder of Coursera, which a lot of students use today, to build projects and build their skills. And so he's actually the co-founder of Coursera, along with Stanford professor in AI, Daphne Koller. She and him both, they have like really core experience in ML, and they've been conducting core ML research, has to do with building better algorithms in ML itself, and so that's their work concentration. And so the very first courses on Coursera were about AI, and that's how the general public got to know about AI and understanding how could you go beyond hard coding or as such programming. So if you've, many of you might have heard of LeetCode or HackerRank, where you just go and you solve problems, where you have to like optimize an algorithm or like write a program that gives you certain results based on a certain type of data set. And so what if the computer itself could learn what to do, what program to run on a certain set of data to get the right answers? And so that's what machine learning is. So one very preliminary project that people can easily understand AI with is, us as humans, we can like differentiate between dogs and cats, and so that's classification. Classifying data into two different groups. Now, how do you get a machine to do that by itself? It learns, what edges or what patterns does an image of a dog have compared to that of a cat. And so it teaches itself that, and so that's what the core of machine learning is. Different areas of AI, deep learning, supervised learning, and computer vision. So let me start with the most exciting one, I guess, and the easiest to understand is computer vision, which is what I gave you an example of, differentiating between two different types of images. Computers having their own set of eyes, so computer vision, and figuring things out for themselves. And so that's the core of computer vision. I'll let David talk about the other areas of AI. And yes, that's the very beginning of how the world got to know about AI and ML in general. I also wanted to add a few words about how you can get started with AI and ML, and introducing projects like that into your resume. One very easy way is obviously just Coursera. You can literally just go and you look up Andrew Ng's very first course. They have started projects in there. I think that would be good, and that would give you certain skills that you need, let's say in Python, very essential language, which is most like generally accepted today in the field of AI and ML. Also, Tensorflow is a very like core ML library that has a lot of functions that you use in order to like create models, sequential models. And so yeah, that's the very, I guess that's an intro to ML and building those projects and adding them into your portfolio. And yeah, I'll let David take on from here.
Test. All right. First of all, thank you all for coming. So that was a lot of information, right? And it kind of makes sense once you're into AI and ML that it would be a lot of information, because AI and ML isn't like programming where you can just learn a programming language and jump into it. It's an entire field of study. So in AI and ML, there's not only like core concepts that you have to learn, like linear algebra, statistics. There's also a tool set like TensorFlow or PyTorch. And then you also need another set of tools to handle all that data that you're going to feed into your models that you're going to make with those tools, like Google Cloud or AWS. So it's a lot. So where do you start? As Pranjali mentioned, you probably want to start in the fundamentals on Coursera with Andrew Ng's courses. They're also free on YouTube. He made an entire playlist for them on YouTube. They're very good. I really recommend them. From then, you can, question?
You recommend doing linear algebra?
Huh?
You recommend doing linear algebra?
Linear algebra? And you only need to go up until you have enough knowledge about matrices and what they are, how they work, how to multiply them, what the inverse, transpose, and all that is.
Yeah.
And then after that, you need linear algebra anymore, in my opinion. You probably need statistics more. So, right. So after you're done with the fundamentals, where do you go from there? You need to learn a tool. And the biggest tool right now in the industry is TensorFlow. Okay, so where do you learn TensorFlow? Guess what? It's on Coursera as well. So Andrew Ng actually collaborated with another top guy in AI. I can't remember his name right now, but it starts with an L. Yeah, so you can audit those courses on Coursera, meaning you can just do them for free, but you can't do the graded assessments and all that. But hey, it's free. From there, what do you need to actually get a job or an internship in AI and ML? Well, you need the fundamental knowledge, you need the tool, and now you need an actual project. You need something to show that you know what you're doing. So what can a project like this be? Well, first you need some data. So let's say you want to do the cat versus dog thing. There's a very famous data set in Kaggle that you can use for this. And Kaggle is the primary website I use to get these data sets. Kaggle is a data science competition website. They have a ton of data sets for you. You can just go to Kaggle and find a data set you would like. For this example, let's say you want the cat versus dog. So you get into the cat versus dog, and now you want to use TensorFlow to make a model using that data. And obviously, I'm skipping a little bit of steps here because the Kaggle data sets are pretty clean, so you don't need a feature engineer the data as much, but you probably get the picture if you've gone to the other courses. Right, so now you have your data, you have the model you're going to make with TensorFlow or PyTorch or whatever. Now you actually need to deploy whatever you're going to do. So when you're trying to show off an ML project, just training a model and having it predict stuff is pretty much nothing. Because if you have this model that basically trained on this data and only you can use it, then what's the point? So you actually need to deploy this model somehow. And there's a couple ways to do it. One way, you can actually make a website and have the model on a Docker image, and you can request like an API to a model. And that's one way. So once you have those 3 steps, you have the data, the model, and you deployed the model, you can call that an ML project, and you can put that on your resume, and that'd be a very solid project you can talk about when you're in an interview. And so speaking about web development, I'll start handing it over to Thomas to speak about web dev courses or whatever.
All right, hi guys. I'm here to talk about web development. Web development is a pretty interesting subject right now because it seems like if you look at there's lots of, it's one of the most hired studies you could do within computer science. Like when you graduate, you'll see a lot of jobs like at like Microsoft will say software developer, but then if you ask, they have web development within the stack. So they're just kind of hiring in general, but they have like web developers that they're looking for web developers too. And there's also just front end and back end positions. So if you want to get a job and get hired, web development is something interesting, but I also think it's interesting in general. So there's a couple fields within web development. There's front end, back end, and full stack. And I'll explain what that means in a second. The front end is sort of like the visual facing aspect of the website. So that's where you style things and make it look a certain way. And that's also where you use certain technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML and CSS are just basic styling, and JavaScript adds a little bit of logic to the website. So, and there's something called a framework, because JavaScript itself can be a little bit hard to use, and there's certain aspects of JavaScript development on a website that takes a really long time. So there's different frameworks that people use. The most common one is React. There's other ones called Angular and Vue, and they're very similar to React in general. You know, for me, for front end itself, I would recommend to spend a couple weeks learning HTML and CSS, learn the basics of JavaScript, and then get into React or Angular or Vue, but React is the most common, so I would just recommend it because there's the most documentation, there's the most YouTube videos. If you want to look up how to do a specific project, there's probably a link somewhere online that actually like almost does it for you. And I won't get into backend, I'm going to leave that to Manny. And there's also something called full stack, which is a combination of front end and back end. And one of the biggest misconceptions about full stack is that you have to be an expert in both, but actually it's more about front end you could be specializing in front end but no back end, and you're full stack. So you don't need to be like a complete expert and know both of them equally and like know them, because it's a lot of information. So yeah, to learn front end, I would recommend, there's lots of YouTube videos, there's lots of documentation. I like to read documentation because once you start reading documentation, it gets a little bit easier to like develop using it. But if you're more of a video audio learner, YouTube videos are great. So I'm gonna bring Manny up, and he's gonna explain some of the aspects of the back end.
Hello. So the backend. So I started off with, say hi guys, I'm Manny, the co-lead for the web dev team. So I started in front end, and I started watching videos. I started copying some projects. I started breaking down code. It worked for me, and then little by little, I just started learning how everything worked. And that's kind of like how I learned how everything works. Then I did the internship, you guys know, and then I started just dabbling little by little into backend, and within a month I was already like dabbling really hard on it. I don't think you need a lot of experience. You just have to know what you're looking for, how just a mechanism works, how the web works, basically. If you understand that concept, then backend becomes a lot easier. It's very simple, yet complicated at first. And right now, basically, I'm a full stack. And so I'm a full stack specialized in front end. So like he said, or like Thomas said, that you don't have to be a master in both, but I could do both. But mostly I dabble more into front end since I do a lot of designing and a lot of UI UX, you know. I don't really use anything like Angular or Vue. I don't really dabble too much outside of like my comfort zone, but that's pretty much how I started. Just start using a bunch of just start copying a bunch of like projects and break them down, you know, and just see how everything works. And then if you break it, fix it, you know. That's pretty much it. So technologies for the back end, I mostly use Node. I mostly use Node because you know, if you if you guys know your technologies, I'm probably just about to bring a bunch of stuff that nobody knows about. Like I use Dockers, Kubernetes, Node, Express, a bunch of libraries. I don't want to complicate it too much, but the purpose of it is that you have to understand that there's different types of servers that work for different types of things. You don't want to use a server that crashes, you know, according to, like, Node is very infamous for crashing at any time for anything. And so you want to Dockerize it. So then you put it into a containment area where it's kind of like air seal tight, and that you can restart it every time it crashes. And so that way you fix that. It becomes the perfect chaos. That's what they call it, because Node is always going to crash. But if you prevent that from happening and you just restart it, it's a perfect chaos. So you start learning like a bunch of stuff along like this path of just like looking for stuff, you know, and that's pretty much it. In the case of backend, it's not too complicated. Databases, you just start learning how data actually starts becoming stored into an app. You become interested in how it gets stored, where it gets stored, like, you know, and all the methods. That's pretty much backend. You mix it with the front end and you get a full stack. And right now, I'm going to pass it to the very best Azar and Kanza.
Thank you. Oh. What up, peeps? How's everyone doing today? Good. Good? Yeah. You sure? How are you guys doing today? Tell me that. All right, let's go. Let's go, peeps. All right, so everyone, my name is Azar, and
hello guys, my name is Kunza.
yes, and we are, two of us make up the mobile dev tech leads at GDSC FIU, and we're here to talk to you about what we arguably think is one of the best fields in CS, arguably to us, mobile development. And why is this the case, right? So, well, first we have to get into a little bit, what is mobile development? Mobile development goes past building just for applications. Mobile development goes, depending what framework you use, it could actually be developing, you know, kind of sort of, some sort of like web apps, you know, like progressive web apps, or it goes into, you know, developing for smartwatches, for TVs, you know, for all sorts of different appliances. So you could use essentially the code that you use to build mobile applications in all sorts of different areas. So it's very, very extensive, and you actually see mobile development everywhere, to be honest. And there's different types of mobile development too that you could get into. So there is two types that you see on the screen. There's native development and hybrid development, or most commonly known as cross-platform development. What is the difference between the two of them? And there's also mobile responsive web apps like PWAs, or progressive web apps like I had mentioned before. So yeah, native web apps are essentially you code for the specific technology that you want. There's two main technologies, as I'm sure most of you know. There is Android and there is iOS. Typically for native, you code in Android Java, which is what we actually teach for our community. And there is Swift for iOS as well. So you could code specifically for that. But there's also a way that if you don't want to code for just one, right? You don't want to create an app for Android and an app for iOS, right? That does the same thing. You want to do both? There's a way to do that. So there is what is called cross-platform development, which allows for you to use one code base to develop an app for both multiple platforms and applications. So it can go, if you still have like a Windows phone, it could go on to a Windows phone, Apple phone, and Android phone. And some common tools that you could use, there's quite a few. For those of you web developers familiar already with React, there is something called React Native, which is developed by Facebook. Yes, that you can use to develop web apps. There's also a Google technology called Flutter, which is really good as well. And also allows for you to develop for, using Flutter, you could also develop for web too, which is kind of insane. I haven't tried that yet, but could do that. There's pros and cons, you know, between whether you want to do native versus hybrid. Like for instance, hybrid, as you would imagine, you only code once, right? It's simple enough as that. And, you know, it's less time coding, and, you know, it might be cheaper. But with native development, there's actually higher graphics, and there's actually, since you're not, because with hyper development, there's actually kind of an extra layer that the phone has to go through to identify whether it's iOS or Android, right? So you can imagine that kind of slows down the phone a little bit. So it's not as responsive as a normal native application. So that's why companies like Facebook, Google, they typically, for their main applications, typically code in native. And, like, for instance, when I was at Facebook for an internship, like, we coded in Android. But there was other teams for iOS, depending what you're working on. And it differs from web development in the sense that, or mobile responsive web apps, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. They're web apps, you could use like React or any, Angular or whatnot, and it allows for you to, it basically is creating for a website, but instead of actually creating for a website, it's built in a way that, it's a website, but for the phone, it feels super, almost the exact same thing as a real application. So it's on the web, or it's on a browser like Safari or whatever, but it works pretty clean as well. And it differs from web development in the fact that typically with this sorts of development, everything is contained within the application. So for instance, for mobile development, like what Manny and Thomas were just talking about, there's a front end and there's a back end. That doesn't exist in mobile development. Everything is all in one. So for maybe if you're trying to figure out whether you should get into this field, maybe this might be an easier start for you. It totally depends. Otherwise, you could be a front-end engineer, you could be a back-end engineer. For mobile, you tend to just be like a mobile engineer. You're really working with UI and back-end kind of at the same time, if that makes sense. And like I mentioned on the screen, those are some common, actually, I will pass it on to you if you want to talk, please.
All right. Hello, guys. So as you can see, these are some of the languages you work with in mobile development, right? Java being the most common one for Android development, which we also teach, and Kotlin being the very hot language right now, where Java is gonna be gone in a few years, honestly, and Kotlin will be the new Java. Or Python version of Java, actually.
No! No!
So, okay.
What are you saying?
And I'm not a Pythonista, but it's a cleaner version of Java basically, and less lines of code. Okay, so in mobile development, right? So when it comes to jobs, you have all kinds of jobs. Like if you want to go for Android specific, you have like Android mobile development. And if you want to go for iOS, they have iOS mobile development, right? And honestly, why wouldn't you want to go for this job? Because the base salary for this job starts from 80,000 to 110,000. So that should give you a good motivation to start, right? Honestly. And once again, being a FIU student, we learn Java basically in all our programming classes, right? So to me personally, it was the most easiest thing to start with, just because I was so familiar with Java, and because I did some projects in through Java in mobile development, I got to learn more about Java, which made it easier for me to move from Java to other languages, right? Do you want to add something for mobile development?
Also, if you learn Java, it's good for your coding interviews too, which are important.
Definitely. So I will be moving forward and telling you guys about UI UX. Awesome. So UI UX, right? Now we all have heard of this term, right? Who has not heard of this term here? Interesting.
Danny and Man.
Yes, it is. But how many of us would actually know the difference between these two? No hands. One hand. Two hands. Okay. But majority of us won't, right? Because the thing is, like, when we talk about UI, we put UX with it, not knowing what these two things are. But in actual reality, these two things are completely different, but they work together. Now, UI being the user interface, right? Meaning how it looks like. Now, when I talk about how it looks like, it comes with, oh, what font to use, what colors to use, how would it like appeal to the users, and how smoothly it would work, how would it move from one page to another, right? But when I talk about user experience, it's way deeper than just the title. So user experience is a lot of research work. You have to research, okay, the application you're building, what kind of user are you going for? And are you fulfilling that things in your application? And what exactly things you want your application to have? It's not going to be concerned with how your application looks like, but it will concern with what your application actually has, right? So a lot of times we're not taught about UI UX in our classes, regular classes, but it's a very popular field in computer science, and it's very useful regardless of like how we say, oh, mobile development and like, you know, web and whatnot. But if something doesn't look good and if it doesn't appeal to like, you know, people like Netflix, let's say Netflix, right? If it was a very poorly done website, right, no one would be using it. So there's a lot of UI and UX going on behind that, right? It's a very position no one talks about, but very important one. And if you guys really want to like try to explore your creative side and see if it is for you, there are some really good tools such as Figma for UI. And when it comes to research, you kind of have to see like, oh, what application you're trying to build and what is your target audience. And you would want to research like what your audience would want, right? So Figma being one of the good tools for UI, and you can do prototyping there, wireframing, and you have Adobe XD as well. That's one of a really good designing tools. And I will pass it further to Azar, and he will tell you guys more about it.
So there is like Figma and Adobe XD. So those are some popular tools. There's also a lot of good resources online. If you're trying to do research on, get inspiration for designs and that sort of stuff. One really good website for finding resources on, you know, inspirations and stuff is Dribbble with three B's. It's, you know, they have a bunch of free designs that you could take a look online, and then it helps you you know, visualize like, okay, maybe I want to take this landing page, or maybe I want to take this page, or, you know, or if you're building some kind of specific app, you can get a kind of general flow which will help with your user experience, like, oh, like this page should navigate to this page, or this page should navigate to this page. So that's really, you know, there. And then there's other good resources online which we could send later on afterwards that are really good. If you're looking into getting to UI UX or even mobile development, or even any of these fields, to be honest, the best way to get into these fields is to really give it a shot and try building a project in it. I would say, you know, that's been my experience with mobile development and with graphic design and UI UX in general, is, you know, try not to let all of the information bog you down, and just start from somewhere. Start from anywhere. You know, if you have an idea for an app you've been wanting to build for a while, or a cool design, you know, try to see, you know, there's a bunch of, like, you know, as others mentioned before, YouTube is a really great resource, definitely, for designs. Like I just look up literally, you know, Canva illustrations, or Canva, or not Canva, sorry, that's for another job. Figma illustrations, or Figma, you know, a Figma, I want to make like this kind of specific design, or if I want to, you know, do something. There's a lot of good resources online. And I also follow, you know, if you're looking into getting to user experience and stuff, I actually follow a lot of Instagram pages for the kind of designs. They're actually super OP. One of them is called UX Bucket. Super clean with their designs, and they give a lot of good insight onto, you know, like typography, you know, how you should do blobs or anything. There's a lot of good stuff out there. It's super accessible too, free too, you know. And the more projects that you do, the more the more research that you do. Just scrolling through, and if you try out Figma, there's only six possible tools that you could use on there. Super user friendly. I'm sure you guys will be surprised with what you guys can achieve. So that's my number one quote in life: be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Get outside your comfort zone, try something new. Yeah, but that's kind of all we have to say for now. Yeah, and I believe we'll be leaving it back to the great Mr. Danny Batalene, who will talk about product management.
Thank you. Okay, guys, so product management, this is one that you're definitely not going to learn much at all about in class. And you might have heard this term before, and you've also heard project management, program management. Between these three, it can be a little confusing, but basically, product management and program management are kind of similar, but there are different companies that call them different things, for example. Like, if you look at the job description for a program manager at Microsoft, it's basically the same thing as a product manager job description in other parts of the industry. So as a product manager, which this is actually one of the most important parts of developing software, you're basically seeing the development of a project, a product or feature from start to finish. So this definitely involves a lot of talking to people. So I know this might not be for everybody, but yeah, you need to talk to people a lot to get to know their pain points, get to know their needs, and find some opportunities for how you can improve their lives and maybe get some good feedback from them, because getting feedback is one of the most important parts of a product manager's job. And yeah, it's a customer facing role, but you also interact a lot with other people in your business, whatever business you're in. It's basically a cross-functional job. You interact with people who are engineers and also business people, and maybe even marketing people. So like I said, it's from start to finish, but even after your work is apparently finished, you can still find yourself with a lot more work to do, maybe with marketing and with future updates on your feature. So from the beginning, when you were doing product management, trying to figure out what the needs of the customer are, that involves a lot of ideation. So you're basically getting the product off the ground, and you're eventually coming up with the ideas for what your engineers are going to do. And they're not necessarily your engineers, you're just like in charge of giving them some kind of direction so they're not aimless. And you are also in charge of developing like a roadmap, like a plan for actually having a successful project, which also means obviously you need to define what does success mean for whatever product you're working on, and when is it going to be finished. That's another thing you got to think about. But yeah, you need to define what is your criteria for success. For example, that's one thing you do as a product manager. And you also set expectations. So this is where the management part comes in. You're basically talking to the entire team, which can be very large teams and depending on the company. And so you need to develop these expectations and get feedback from the customer. And a lot of the time, as a product is being developed, you will continue developing more and having like a prototype to show to your client. So for example, if you're in the middle of developing, like about to start development on a new feature after initially like coming up with the idea for whatever you're doing, you can find yourself having many meetings. This is a role that definitely involves a lot of meetings, like face-to-face meetings. Even as a developer, you're going to have a lot of meetings, but For product management, it's even more meetings. So if you apply, make sure you know that if you're applying to be a product manager. And in meetings, for example, you could be showing a lot of prototypes and material that shows the customer concerned with this product what you've been doing so far. And this way you'll get feedback that is very important to show to report back to the engineers in charge of this product. And sometimes product managers are even seen as like a liaison, like a connection between the engineers and the customer, because the engineers are mostly just focused with execution. Obviously, you need to have a sort of part of a vision for what you're doing as a software engineer, but as a product manager, you're more like in charge of setting up what exactly this vision is. But yeah, that's about all for product management. And make sure that when you're applying to a job, like I said, applying to a position in this, be very careful when reading descriptions, because sometimes you'll see another title under it, like program manager. But when you start reading the description, it's actually exactly the same as what I said right now, what I described as a product manager. So it definitely varies a lot by company, and also depending on what team you're on. So everything I just said, there are some product managers that might actually have jobs that are completely different than this. But yeah, it varies a lot. Even during like different stages of the product lifecycle, you can find yourself doing very different things as a product manager. And that's one of the reasons that people actually like the job a lot, because they say it's very different every day. And also you don't have to code as much. Some people like that, I guess, especially when you get older and your wrists start like hurting like hell because of carpal tunnel. But yeah, that's about all for product management. And so we are going to actually now go into questions. So we're going to be taking questions that are just in general, or if you have like a more specific question for a certain person that talked about like mobile development, for example, then feel free to ask any questions you have. And we'll also be seeing what questions people have online. Any questions right now so far? Nobody has any questions? Then we can
Oh, wow. This is a giant map.
wait, what map?
Product management, a giant map.
Not sure what you're referring to. I guess you have to like lay out a map for the progress of the project. But yeah, if nobody has any questions, thank you guys for coming. And we're gonna be staying here. You guys are free to stay in and chat with us and like ask any questions in private if you feel like. But thank you guys so much for everything, and we're glad you came.
Is this working?
Thought you tested it when you first came in here. That's what I'm trying to. That's what I'm setting up right now.
No. We have enough of that movie. We should ban it.
Oh no.
No. It's trash.
Is this like a thing? Play the emoji movie every meeting.
All right. So one question we have here. For PM, do business majors get selected more than a CS major? All right, so that's a very good question from Paola Hernandez. Yeah, so Paola, if you can't hear me, comment and let me know, and if not, then good. Hope you're listening. But yeah, business majors, they, I wouldn't know the actual answer to that question, actually, but it's important to keep in mind, if you want to be a PM, you definitely don't need to be a CS major. What's up?
Yeah, if you're going for a product management position,
and you're a CS major, you gotta climb the ladder to get there. To be honest, you gotta probably go into a software engineer, and then you become the leader of a team, like a senior engineer, and then you go into product management.
And there's so many product managers that don't actually know much at all about tech. It's good if you know at least a little bit. That's definitely a good idea, especially if you're a product manager at a tech company making tech products. But product management is open to basically like any kind of major. That's the great thing about it. There are people that get business degrees, and I think don't take my word for this, but that can actually help you if you want to be a PM, a PM person, because it involves some business related knowledge. But either way, you'll probably just learn on the job. Yeah, just I would put end screen. There's like one more question though, so I want to see. I just want to see if Manny is a. I'm just gonna see if Manny can answer this quick question here because it says like mobile responsive web apps. Yo, Manny. Do you have a minute? Somebody has a quick question about mobile responsive web apps. You could actually like talk into this and they'll hear you.
All right.
Yeah, do
So
you see
what's the question? So thank you for the event. Helpful. What are the technologies for developing mobile responsive web apps? So you have hold on, let me see. Oh, can you guys see me?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
They can hear you and see you.
Okay, so you have a series of different types of web apps. Uh, the ones that I mainly focus are PWAs, well, progressive web apps. So the stack, like when you say technologies, you mean like the stack, right? I usually use Node, Express, and depending on what type of database that I want to use, I tend to use anything like, I want to say MongoDB or MySQL, depending on how I want the data to be stored. And so that's technically how you go about the technologies when like the stack of a PWA for the back end. For the front end, I usually use anything from like React.js and I want to say Axios for the API calls. Yeah, it's that's specifically useful, extremely useful for the API calls. And then you have, I want to say, I'm just trying to like iterate the most important parts. It would be React, Axios. It would be, you could either use Bootstrap or Material UI. I like to go with Material UI because it's lighter than Bootstrap.
Fluent UI, they changed it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they named it Fluent UI now.
Instead of Bootstrap?
No, for Material UI.
Oh, no, it's still Material UI.
No, I think they changed just the name to Fluent UI.
It hasn't gotten deprecated though yet. But
Not deprecated. If you're saying like they changed
no, but when you change when you change like the name of a library, it usually gets deprecated. Yeah.
I mean that hasn't happened.
No, but it's still available. So like Material UI or Fluent UI, it's a lot lighter than what is it called, Bootstrap. So you would want to use that instead. Let's see. Thank you for okay. Oh, you're welcome. Okay. If you have any more questions, just let me know, and then just let me know in the Discord.
So do you know how to end? Yeah, I know. I'll just click the button. Let's see if anybody else said anything.
the 32 bit, so like there's certain things that you register, yeah, and like you have the main memory, right? So what it is doing is like, you know, this is technically like the main memory, like, well,
Wait,
kind of
you're
like
not
the
ending
place
into
where like
OBS?
the main memory is like, the pointer, like where it's pointing to the main
I
memory.
mean, I have to end it here
It
first
subtracts,
anyway.
you know, like to create space, and it's
Alright,
like,
go.
it stores these, I always forget, I keep using, I keep
I'm just saying, I remember